Order at 1 p.m. and stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Okay. Our roll call, both of our members are present. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, there are no audience participants present. We have no new business at this point. And I would imagine we still, neither one of you would prefer to be the chairperson. So
You hasn't changed any, no. My workload has not changed any.
I was pretty sure that wasn't changing. But we'll keep recruiting members.
Okay,
Good.
I am actually going to move at the end of the summer, so you're going to lose me as a member.
Wow, we're gonna try to have some really good meetings between now and then.
Okay.
Last time Kurt walked us through some concerns and thoughts he had on Title VII, and we'd like to continue that today.
Well, sadly, I wasn't able to do much movement on this since we last met. Had a family emergency to deal with, and it's end of year, end of fiscal year, which imagine it's pretty wild around here. But so I guess I'd like to see if after reviewing it, if y'all had noticed anything else, anything you'd like to discuss beyond what I mentioned and had highlighted in our last meeting.
Sadly, I forgot to bring mine. So
Okay.
I didn't bring my copy. I
Oh.
was in the yard and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my word, I'm late.
Here's a new copy.
For what
Thank
it's
you.
worth, I got here about 45 minutes ago and had to go back to the office and grab mine.
Oh, no.
But still, no problem. You know, if you'd, if either of you had had a chance to review it, if there's anything else that kind of stood out or.
I really haven't had time to do.
Right.
That's fine.
Well, we'll just hold it there for a minute while you look through.
Could someone remind me what point we got to review last time?
We got to the end.
Did we?
Yeah. It's kind of quick there at the end,
On the, under, on that 7143, licenses and bonds in section B. I don't remember if we discussed it or not. I think we did, about holding have a valid contractor's license for the state of New Mexico. Which is fine. What I'm curious about is the, if an individual wants to do it themselves, which probably might happen on a rare occasion, to have the equipment to do that or to rent it or whatever. Talks about a surety bond, but it doesn't give a specific amount. Does that need to specify a specific amount to indemnify the village in case it's put in incorrectly?
yeah, where a surety bond would come into play is if they were doing work that was going to be accepted or taken over by the village, like if they were going to install a water line, and from that. That requires stamped engineer drawings, even
Yeah.
if the homeowner can do it themselves. And then the bond would need to be for the amount to cover at least the engineer's estimate.
Does that need to be specified in, under this section?
I believe that that's probably more addressed in Title IX. Title IX is where matters of construction of items that are going to be taken over by the village come into play. Which, you know, brings up a good point. If we ever did reach the point where people would have to pay the village to install their culvert and do that, you know, it would create the situation where if they wanted us to take over the maintenance of that culvert and that section of road, then the work done initially would need to have engineered stamp design. And for the work, they'd have to provide surety, I think. I don't know.
Do you require, if you put in one of these culverts or whatever, do you do, are you getting a stamped engineer for the design work?
When we put culverts in,
Mhm.
if we're replacing an existing culvert, no. If we're impacting a protected or endangered waterways, absolutely. We actually have a project on the books, yeah.
Yeah, but that's wetlands and things like that, but I'm talking about just a normal driveway, and that's what you're referring to here. What I'm saying.
You asked if when I was putting a culvert in.
No.
Okay.
With the village, if the village puts in a culvert,
Uh-huh.
and I'm trying to differentiate between the two.
Okay,
If an individual, you're saying that if an individual wants to put in one of these culverts, but themselves, you're going to require them to have a stamped engineer drawing.
if they want to use a surety bond in lieu of paying the encroachment deposit.
But
That's
they
why
can't
it's
do
in
the
this section.
encroachment deposit because they don't hold a valid contractor's license.
There's process in place for homeowners to do their own work, and it's legal in New Mexico. When you fill out your encroachment permit, all owners have to do is provide their proof of liability insurance. So maybe or I guess what we're getting at, and yeah, it would be very easy to add, is that owners can install their own culverts. But they have to pay the encroachment fees just like anybody else would.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. And also, you talked about referencing the chapter 9 or
Yes.
on construction standards. That should be mentioned here in this section to reference. Otherwise, they're not going to know, somebody's going to read this and they're gonna say, okay, well, I have to have a surety bond. But then they're gonna come and say, well, how much is a surety bond? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm trying to make this as clear as possible so that the village can't get any pushback from an individual that wants to do this themselves. And like I said, it's probably one of those once in a blue moon kind of thing. But if I was in that situation, I have access to a backhoe. I could do it.
Mhm.
But if I did it, then what this section is telling me is that if I don't have valid contractor's license with the state of New Mexico, I have to provide a surety bond. You're also telling me then that or at least maybe I misunderstood, that you're gonna require, if I put this in, you're gonna require a stamped engineered drawing.
If you didn't hear me all the way through. If the work done is to be accepted by the village for maintenance and take over ownership. That's the kind of stuff that's in Title IX. Title IX addresses more work that is, you know, throughout the village, we have roads that are platted, but not up to village standards for acceptance.
Okay,
So the situation is, in order for the village to accept that, the owners of the property along that street pay for the installation of properly sized water lines. Construct a road profile that's acceptable to the village, which all those specifications are in Title IX. They're in 7 and 9 actually. And the radius of a cul-de-sac, if it ends in a cul-de-sac, has to have the frequency of fire hydrants. And it states very clearly in Title IX that stamped approved plans by an engineer have to be provided. And it's whether the owner does the work themselves or hires a contractor, there still has to be engineered plans prior to the village taking over.
you're mainly referring to like bid districts and stuff, right?
Yeah, PID districts, or there's a cul-de-sac up off of Cheerful Way. Somebody built a house on the end. The contractor told them the village is gonna build you a road to here. And we said, well, we'll take over maintenance of the road if you build it up to our specs and we'll accept it.
What about those instances where the roads have been put in, but it been put in incorrectly? And you end up like Valley of the Utes up in Ravenwood. Where, I think it's Durban. Sean O'Donovan's building a house up there and the village wouldn't, there was a lot of confusion because of the way that road and that cul-de-sac sits and they lot property. So there was a lot of confusion, and I know that some of these other roads aren't put in exactly where they're platted. So,
You know what? You know what?
no,
Let's go ahead and we'll start with Ravenwood, or what's the issue there?
well, the issue is one, he wanted I think it's, and I don't know all of the specific details, but he wanted a variance from the village on I think it was either the setback, and I think it was the front yard setback. And the village wouldn't give it to him for whatever reason. But that's just one particular instance that I can think of, that there's a discrepancy between where the property line is platted and the actual road where has been put in. Because the actual road doesn't match the profile of the plat. There's a difference, there's a discrepancy there.
That's a discussion of setbacks. That setbacks are on the property owner's side.
Yes, but there's also a right of way issue.
Right of way is set. Width of the road and where the road is located in the right of way is kind of irrelevant. There's road right of ways up here that are 100 feet wide. And the road is on one edge of the right of way.
All I'm saying is that there's places here in the village that there's discrepancies between where the road is actually in place compared to if you were to look at a set of drawings, it's different. So the property lines don't match. If you have lots and the road comes through here, normally you got your property corner pins here, but in some cases, that's not the case. You've got your property pins here, but the actual road is over here. This is pretty much no man's land.
Yeah, and it's necessary.
No,
I mean, that
doesn't include the right of way.
okay.
We're getting
Yeah,
off
no.
into something that
No, we
we
need,
don't need to be getting into. I'm just
no,
saying.
because when the
that's-
coffee shop talk starts, I want to get through it. Okay? The majority of there's a good majority of right of ways up here that are 60 feet wide. Okay?
Okay,
They were in the mountains. That would hold true if we were on flat ground. Within that right of way is where the cut and fill should take place. Now, there's absolutely areas where fill exceeds the property lines. It has to. Some of these right of ways were platted way too narrow. Way before there was even a city of Angel Fire. But they're the roads that we've got. Okay. And quite frankly, a good number of roads up here would not meet the requirements for road construction right now that the Village of Angel Fire has in the books.
No, I mean,
In
absolutely.
regards to grades, curvature. And the width of the right of way should accommodate the terrain. There's roads in the pit and in the, you know, the north end of the Aspen subdivision, or, you know, Brazos and all those areas, where there's no way the entire road profile can fit in the road right away because of cut and fill. And prior, there were no standards for lane widths, amount of shoulder, design of foreslope, depth of bar ditch to accommodate. So even during the PID, it was a struggle to fit the required road profile that the Village of Angel Fire had in place and their engineering firm. There just simply wasn't wide enough. So they made variances on road widths and used various varying road profiles to accommodate that. And plain and simple, you have places where property corners are right at the edge of the road, and on the other side, there's right of way. It's not just a case also of it being in steep cross terrain. There are flat areas, Alpine Lake Way, in between Calle de los Indios, in between both entrances to Calle de los Indios, is 110 feet wide. Okay, the road is built on the east side of that right of way. Every property on that stretch of Alpine Lake Way has an additional 50 to 60 feet of road front. And in some of these areas, to try to realign the road where it has the equal amount of space in between edge of road profile, and then we have to ask which part of the road profile. Are we talking about bottom of dark bar ditch? Are we talking about hinge point? Are we talking about edge of lane? Are we talking about edge of shoulder? Okay, building roads in the mountains and understand that so much design is done on a flat piece of paper. Okay, and you can go to so many areas where the road is meandering from one side of the right of way to the other, and the terrain dictates it. Yeah.
So can we go back to the surety bond issue and decide if we need some amplification?
Well, I think there needs to be language in there that there is option for the owner builder to install their own culvert.
Okay.
Because we have the processes in place in the permitting process and the permit application packet. Which in there, it states that in regards to that, it states that the licensed contractor must provide his contractor's license, business license, proof of insurance, and proof of workers' compensation. And then it states if it is an individual homeowner, that they need to provide a copy of liability insurance.
Okay. So anything else on this particular?
I would suggest that you add in there, or if you're gonna, or must provide post a surety bond equal to cost of construction, or equal to cost of the project, or something to that effect. So that it's very clear, if somebody wants to do this on their own, they know what that surety bond is going to, how much that's going to be, instead of having a back and forth between the village whoever that is, whether that's you or P and Z, whoever that goes through, so that they know right away that if they're gonna do that themselves, they have to post this surety bond equal to the cost of the construction.
One of the things that I noticed in here is when the term bond or bonds are used, it's not specific to, we assume that it's surety bonds. There was a short amount of time where in lieu of paying the encroachment deposit, you give them a copy of your bond. Okay, so we give them a copy of our bid bond, which every licensed contractor has to maintain their license. Totally different than a surety bond. Surety bond is an insurance policy. And the thing about it, you know, a surety bond is what you go out and you get for each individual project. And depending on your bonding capabilities, that determines what percentage of the cost of project you have to pay for the bond. This is something that limits smaller contractors from bidding on larger jobs. When a surety bond is required, they may be capable of doing the work, but they cannot get a bonding company to bond them. Well, they'll bond them, but maybe they're paying 25–30%. Okay, I equate it to owning a Corvette, but they won't sell you insurance because your garage isn't nice enough. Okay, that's the struggle with smaller contractors. That's the struggle with doing larger municipal projects with people from the area. Very capable and probably more knowledgeable than people from out of town coming in to do it. They don't have the bonding capability. So a surety bond is totally different than just your normal bid bond that everybody has to carry. But I think and this was something I discussed in the last meeting, was, you know, the term bonds, it needs to be specific. If it's a situation where a surety bond is required, then it needs to be stated. Some call it a performance bond. We're required on any work done by a contractor that is new construction that is over 40,000, I think, if it's funded by grant money, it's a requirement.
Okay, I've made a note on this. We'll go back and review it.
I think anytime you can make things clearer to the public that are wanting to do the work,
Yeah,
particularly by themselves, you're gonna save yourselves a whole lot of headache.
well, when we have processes in our active permitting that don't match up to what we have in here, that's why we're reviewing this.
Right.
You know, do we, what we should discuss is if it's a whole, I think it should be a standalone item. You know, with its own letter, with its own number, within the relevant code. And are there things other than encroachment that we should do the same?
Okay.
Because we do have a lot of people that have to do their own work simply because there's some that they have no choice. They can't get anybody to do it.
Right.
So, you know, they haul their equipment all the way from another state to come up and do it.
Yeah.
And I will say that in that case, it's very common to have somebody start a project and not get any kind of encroachment permit. But almost every single case is because they didn't know. Okay, so if it's a situation where somebody's coming to just fix their driveway and they're not going through the building permit process, you know, we should be able to, and a lot of people will call, hey, is there anything we need to do? Some people know to make that call. If they're in excavation business, they generally know. But if it's somebody bringing a backhoe off the ranch, they usually don't. I understand, and like I said, most of the time when you tell them the process, they're fine. You know, y'all should note that in the last council meeting, the resolution was passed to double the encroachment permit fees. So, I bring that up.
So what other items from our discussion last meeting have you thought about or additional items that you want to hit on?
We talked about last time about having these culverts, these box culverts with the grates on these driveways taken over, put in, but then taken over by the village. Has there been any more discussion about that?
Not beyond what we just had, it would definitely, if it's. Again, if it's a case where the village would be taking them over, then Title IX comes into play. I do just wanna jump back, cause I knew there was something in it, but. Things don't match up here in 7.1-4-3. In A, it does say purpose and intent encroachment permits must be obtained whenever a developer, contractor, or property owner. Or other individual proposes to connect a driveway to the existing public. Private roadway,
Where are you at now?
7.1-4-3, what we started off with.
Okay, under purpose?
Yeah, purpose and intent. I would propose that the letter B should state. Any contractor proposing to construct. Contractor or developer. That might be an opportunity to get it where it matches.
Where it now, where it currently says in any individual.
Any individual.
Right.
Cause that, just as he was saying, with that wordage there, that says that any individual. And with A referring to developer, contractor, or property owner. Or other individual purposes. You see what I'm saying? As since the licensing and bonding is required on contractors, but not required on homeowners. See,
Yeah.
now there, knowing that there are trades in New Mexico that an owner builder can't do. Okay, but there are a lot of them that they can. Somebody can build a whole home as an owner builder. The owner can do their own plumbing. Owner can do their own dirt work.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's a process for somebody to do their own electrical. So there is nothing against somebody doing their own dirt work. So I think that's the best opportunity to get the language matching, because in A, it does list developer, contractor, and property owner, but B basically puts them all into one group.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just brought back to that one.
There was some discussions towards the end of the session last time about the village taking over some of these box culverts because they're in the right of way. The individual or builder, whoever will put them in, but then the village, there's a possibility that the village would take those over to do maintenance and everything. They would belong to the village at that point.
If the property owner donated them,
Well,
is that what we're
yes.
talking about? I would donate mine in a heartbeat.
I'm sorry, I don't recall that conversation. I thought it was
Yeah.
more,
We also, at the same time, we referenced, or I referenced the difference, to look at the difference between doing that in the right of way, putting in these after the encroachment permit and everything, and they put in these culverts and everything. And the similarity to me is sidewalks that were put in over here. You put in the sidewalks, but then there's a requirement in the village ordinances or in the codes or wherever that is, that the business owners are required to maintain them. Just like in a street, but they belong to the village. So that's why
but it's also one of the things we intend to change within Title VII. And we had that discussion because what might make sense in the city, cookie cutter houses where everybody has 50, 60 feet of sidewalk in front of their house. It doesn't make sense when you have properties adjacent to sidewalks that are hundreds of feet long with no businesses or buildings on them. To expect the burden to be on that property to remove that snow. Then you get into the realm of enforcement. Doing the right thing for the community, keep the sidewalks clean, which is what we've been doing for 3 years now. And it's something that I had mentioned briefly. I think it was towards the end as we were kind of rushing through. But that is the decision right now, is to strike that language from Title VII, that it's a responsibility of each individual homeowner. Okay, because there it makes sense. But to me, I'm like this with whether the village should be responsible for individual culverts or not. I know there are a lot of people that would love to clean their culvert out, are not capable of doing it. There are a lot of people that their culvert is plugged, they're not aware that that's causing a problem.
Well, the fact that the problem impacts the road,
Yeah,
and I can have mine as clean as I want, and if my neighbor next door doesn't have theirs clean, it's gonna impact me as well as the road. To me, it makes sense for the village to do it because you're protecting your investment in the road. And freeing me up from being dependent on my neighbors doing their
sure.
part. So
But
I would vote for that idea.
but then how far do we want to take it? Because not all the failures that are impacting the road are because people have culverts that are open, free flowing. But the drainage is so poor on their driveway, it runs over the top of the culvert and cuts the road. So do we want to expand this into us building everybody's driveway as well and maintaining it? The biggest culprit for driveway failures up here is the lack of maintenance. Okay, a driveway can be built that sheds water beautifully, drains really well, but it doesn't last forever.
Yeah.
You know, and when that road loses crown, bar ditches get filled in, it's a byproduct of snow removal. Okay, gonna move material. If it's not maintained, then it's gonna start impacting the road, and it does.
Well, I think, can we like stop it at the right of way? Or the easement area where you're saying that I put my culvert in, but you own it now? So it stops there. If my driveway's bad, that's me. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is a great topic that needs serious consideration. There are a lot of factors that come into play, finance being one of the major factors. Personally, if I had the money as village manager, I'd take over all the culverts and hire the staff to keep them clean, because you're right. We're relying on them to keep them clean right now. They don't keep them clean because they come twice a year. And the overflows hitting our roads and tearing up our roads that now we have to deal with. So we don't have the money, to be frank. We don't have the money to just say, okay, all the culverts are ours now. Many of the culverts, I think Kurt would attest to this, are actually undersized because they were put in so long ago when there was no enforcement of this. And they've kind of been quasi grandfathered in, and to make the matter worse, if we just said, okay, all the culverts are ours now, on those culverts that are undersized now, it would be on us to spend the money to get them to fit code. I don't know, I'm not saying what the best answer is, but I think somewhere in the middle is probably what we're gonna be able to do. But I would entertain if we said, bring your culvert into compliance with code. And once it's within compliance, then it can be turned over to the village. But on the other hand, we need enforcement language in the ordinance that says if you're not in compliance with the code, even if you're grandfathered in, there's some sort of binding structure or whatever. There has to be some sort of the village has the authority to rip your culvert out if it's not in compliance or something. I don't know what that language is. But there's two pieces. One, we got to promote everybody, because, you know, we're building 30 to 40 houses a year in a good year and 10 to 20 in a bad year. And those going forward, it's going to take decades, you know, for those to have an impact on what we're doing now. So we got to think of something to address the ones that are out there now. And if we just said, okay, everybody has to bring their driveways up to code. Right now, we don't have, can't red tag their driveway. We don't have any recourse. So people just don't do it. And all we can do is complain about it.
Yeah, but you still have to consider the long-term impact and the costs involved, and you know, and I know, and I'm not real sure exactly what those costs are or how to compute them, but there's a long-term cost and impact to those roads for not, those culverts not being in compliance.
Sure.
And I don't know whether that's costs more to the village to maintain those roads than it does to put in, initially spend the money to put in those culverts so that they're in compliance to begin with. You see what I'm saying? I don't know which would be more cost effective for the village.
Yeah, we don't know those numbers yet, and
Right.
I'm sure we could derive them. It would take quite an effort to do so. The issue is that there is a unmeasurable cost associated with that, because what's been historically happening is the villages let the roads go to hell, excuse my language.
Yeah.
And the cost of that is the dissatisfaction with constituents and guests in the quality of our roads.
Right.
How do you measure that?
Right. Well, you measure that by the number of complaints that you get. That's one way. That's one factor.
But you know, I don't think I've ever called in a complaint about the roads, but while I'm driving, I'm complaining the whole time.
Of course.
I would say that, you know, it's not just complaints, I don't think, because we have too high a percentage of guests. The real issue is that those people leave with a bad taste and decide never to come back.
Right.
And our economy is 100% based around, maybe not 100%, but 90% based around those guests.
Yeah, I know, but that's why I'm saying it has to be one factor. You know, there has to be a way to compute that to where and to figure that. And I'm not even so sure, we've talked about having people put in these box culverts with the grate system on any driveway that's on an uphill, has an uphill slope to it to prevent water from coming down and impacting the road. There's I think the first step has to be the village has to, and I don't know whether that's you, Kurt, or somebody else, to say, to have some sort of a standardized language that says, if you do this, if you build this house on this uphill slope, you will put in these specifics and be very specific about it. Because I know there are some houses that have been built that just put in a regular tin horn. And there's a slope, and they're on a slope.
If you put the right culvert in on your slope, does the driveway deteriorating? Will it still impact the road if you've got the right culvert at the bottom, just?
Yeah, absolutely. Culvert could be working fine, handling the bar ditch fine, but if water's coming down the driveway and going over the top of it,
Okay.
there's the dilemma.
That's why you've gone to a lot of these have gone to that grate system.
Well, yeah,
Where any of
so
the
if
water
we're
is going
requiring a
down
grate
into-
system, if it's
If
got
it
the right
does-
grate,
It's not the homeowner's problem, it's ours, because the grade should be catching the water. And then that water should be flowing to the bar ditch, and if the bar ditch for some reason overflows, that's on us.
I will say there's been a number of people that have mistakenly thought that that was the be all end all cure. They put in a nice expensive box culvert, didn't fix the drainage on their driveway, box culvert's full. So if we feel that in order to make it a requirement, that we have to then take over the maintenance of that box culvert, first and foremost, we would need to verify that it's put in properly. Some of the failures in the box culverts have been installation problems. Some have,
Don't you inspect those installations? Does the village inspect those installations?
I've inspected every one that's been installed since I've started this job, and I've inspected 2 in the last year and a half.
well, I will say as just a homeowner who really doesn't know anything about roads, doesn't know anything about the culvert, I have culverts, my driveway goes over them, it seems fine. I can look at them and see that stuff's building up in them, it's still water's flowing just fine. I don't have the education to understand if there's anything there I need to fix. And I would bet you that that's a whole lot of the other homeowners in the area.
Absolutely.
And so education to start with, and maybe we need to assign someone just to go look at every culvert and walk the homeowner through what needs to be done to it to get it to where it's not impacting the roads.
Sure. Sure.
And if they understood, I never knew that the culvert, never gave it a thought that water running outside of the culvert was gonna impact the road. So,
Yeah.
education, and I come from the world of education and documentation, it's like, you've got to tell people because they don't know.
Yeah, and I've often told the story of a call I got from a gentleman, how rough the road was on the way to his house. I was able to show him that the reason why the road was rough is the driveway was a failure. He said, I had no idea. It was fixed the next week. Again, there's a lot of people out there that want to do the right thing. They just need to be informed. And yeah, I guess I can go around and meet with folks. I already have, this will, let's see, I don't know what time it is, but I'm approaching 27 hours of meetings this week.
Wow.
Okay, end of year, all that stuff. Do we hire somebody to do that? We have an enforcement officer that does building codes, everything else that he's inspecting. We have ideas on how we can utilize him for enforcement. We want to be careful on how we enforce, starting off, as you say, just educating people. But again, what it all goes back to is we feel that trying to enforce some of these regulations is going, we need more meat in the enforcement.
Right.
Plain and simple. It's not that we don't want to enforce. But we don't want to go out there and try to enforce and get no results.
Yes.
Okay, this needs to be thought out a little more. It's just not as easy as driving around saying, oh, that driveway's messed up, that one's messed up, don't give them a fine. And I know you laughed when they said that, you know, when he said, what do we do, rip the culverts out? That was done at one time.
Yeah, I didn't laugh. I was like, oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
Don't be ripping my culvert out.
And for obvious reasons, people want to take that approach. And, you know, what you mentioned about you do the right thing, you fix your culvert for the next one over, starts impacting it. We take over maintenance of the culverts, we're gonna be in that same situation.
Mhm.
But I don't want you to think for a minute that I'm not opposed to, that I'm opposed to cleaning out every culvert alongside the road. I'll admit, over the last year and a half, we've cleaned a lot of driveway culverts to save the road. There was no other option.
Mhm.
We needed to resolve the situation right then and there. Okay. We have not only some of those driveway culverts that we have had to clean out, but also some of the cross culverts that we clean out. We will clean them out, and the next storm we're cleaning them out again. I would love to have a crew. And we've got good equipment for cleaning culverts. It's not the best, but we do have something. I would love to have a crew that is all they did every single day. Knowing that every time we get a big rain, got to go out and in some regards, start all over again.
Right.
And we also need to be realistic and logical with the sheer number of culverts that we would be maintaining.
Well, maybe you start with, we want to do something to fix this road, and before we come in and fix this road, we're gonna meet with the property owners. You can't meet with them, half of them aren't even here, but send a letter to every one of them saying, we want to fix your road, but your culverts are a problem. And we've got to work on the culverts at the same time we do that, and that incentivizes them. We'll get your road fixed, and if your culverts are fixed, it will stay fixed for much longer.
Sure.
And start there, not try to do everything.
Yeah, well, we did in some of the areas that we placed base course last year. As opposed to, you know, okay, we want to do this section of road, but we need to get all these driveway culverts in good shape first. We cleaned them out because I had trucks, I had 12 trucks, I had base course, I had money. Okay. And so we did it. Now there was for a short time, they tried a program where, okay, a village will come through and clean your culvert for free once, and then come back and if it needs to be cleaned again, there'll be a fee.
Mhm.
And I think it's a very good idea if you have the staffing levels,
Yeah,
because what's involved in cleaning out the culvert is it's a minimum of 2 guys. Of course, the process that we use, I would not want somebody doing it by themselves. 3 is more ideal, because it could involve digging some material out, hauling it off, and then running the equipment through the pipe. We have cleaned driveway pipes that have tires in them, because somebody saw the YouTube videos of pulling them through with the chain. No, we're not in mud up here. We've got rock. And anyway, we've seen where, you know, there are situations, plain and simple, that, yeah, I would be willing to clean the culvert, but if I've got to maintain that culvert, I'm gonna be on it after every single rainstorm. There's gotta be a balance, and I just want y'all to know, if I had the staff, I would be 100% for, in fact, like the last big rain that we got, half the crew, it was go find plug culverts. Okay, so, and these are just cross culverts crossing the road.
Why
Okay,
are those plugs, were they installed improperly? Didn't they have enough slope on them?
we get a lot of sediment running into our bar ditches. And of course, this is something I would never want to stop, but there is an obvious impact to drainage and sedimentation in areas where the lots have been thinned out a lot. There's, I really feel that last summer in particular, and this is just a theory, that, and if you think about it, the last few summers, we've gone through these long stretches of extremely dry, and then boom, big storm. I think when you have all that dry ground and you get that big rush of water, it's gonna move more sediment. You know, one of the, but going to installation, and this goes back to design, a lot of which was done in the seventies. Any time you have a bar ditch running down on a grade, as that grade starts to lessen, the sediment starts depositing. And of course, the culverts are at the low point. So by the time it gets down to the flat spot right before the culvert, it's depositing everything. And people might ask, are there means of sediment control? Yeah, you can put checks in the bar ditches to control the sediment. You see that on San Mateo, and engineers really like that. Works great for the first year. Then it's full of sediment. And it's just, it comes down to a point that you have to realize maintenance is the only thing that's gonna keep it working. Constant maintenance, and you're in the mountains, and every time you get a big weather event, there's days when you feel like you're starting over. Last July, the first really big rain event that we had, I've told so many people this story because it's such a good example of what happens. We've gone through this big, long, dry stretch, and we get this downpour of rain. I was on San Mateo when it hit, and I know the storm lasted for 20 minutes because I had to stop because I could not drive at all. Okay. When it stopped, I head out because I've got a crew working on Calle de los Indios. It was overwhelming the design of San Mateo, the new construction. Well, the cross culverts could not handle the capacity. It's a 100-year flood plan, and it overwhelmed it. I get up to Highway 434 and the water's this deep running over Highway 434. Okay. By the time I got to, when I turned in on Monte Verde Lake, the road was dusted. Okay, so there was this isolated event right in that stretch, right up towards the east. And up El Camino Real, every cross culvert and almost every driveway culvert was plugged completely. So started a crew right away. They started on the bottom and they started cleaning culverts and just cleaning out in front of them. Most of them were plugged right at the entrance. They weren't plugged all the way through. Cleaned them out. And I went up to see how they were doing. At about 1 o'clock that afternoon, they were at the wedding deck area. And started raining a little bit. Lightning started popping close. Called the guys off. Went back the next morning. Everything they had done was as full or fuller than the day before. And this was prior to us putting new material on the road, so we can't blame that. It's just we have a tremendous amount of sedimentation. And here again, going back to the roads that we have would not meet design criteria that we have in place right now. Grades, curves, drainage points, number of cross culverts. And the challenge that we have in areas that really do need more cross culverting to cut down on that flow. There are no options to discharge it in a manner that it's not dumping onto somebody else's property. You know, when this was laid out and platted out, it was for maximization of lots. If we were to try to do now what we have in place in Angel Fire, everywhere there's a culvert, there would not be a lot on the down side. There would be a drainage side. But this is what we're left with. We can sit and say, well, they did it wrong years back. We just have to figure out a way and to do it. And then there's no magic potion. There's no this, that, and the other. Plain and simple, what it comes down to is we just have to do anything we can to stay on top of the roads. And we've got so much catch up to do because there was a significant amount of time when nothing was done. Or if it was done, it was in areas of low traffic and little importance. So,
So you're kind of the tip of the spear here to finally get this going over long term. We come up with some language highlighting these issues. And this is gonna come to a council work session and it's gonna get extensively discussed. Hopefully, we'll get the public to show up and then work our way through this. In some cases, there are no good answers, but we need some answers, so.
well, something I would like to add about y'all, you two particular individuals, is I have none of what you have said or comments you have made, I feel is self-serving. I think in any attempts to try to get groups of people together to discuss this issue, in roads and infrastructure, it's pretty easy to see people trying to steer the conversation towards their own individual accommodation. And that doesn't get us anywhere. I appreciate the fact that when you talk about things, it's about everything. You're not, I don't even know where you guys live. There's some people by the time I get done talking to them, I know exactly where they live. I know what time they go to work. I mean, and I just want to say thank you for that. It's encouraging because that I think has been one of the biggest holdbacks to be able to have any dialogue whatsoever. It can't be self-serving. You know, me and Brett joked that, up until a couple of days ago, we drove the worst road in Angel Fire every day to get to our houses. But I also, I don't, my first road's not going to be the first one to get done. I had a great conversation this morning with a lady up on Brazos at Spyglass Hill. Yeah, it's beat up. It's bad right now. We got some crew guys, we're finishing the prep for the paving that's gonna start Monday. And they're gonna try to get over this afternoon and try to do some kind of temporary patch on the chip seal for the 100th time. But as I told her, I care about every single one of these roads. But if I just bounce around to everybody's individual places, we can't establish any continuity. And we've got a lot of catching up to do. But we've got to be careful how we catch up as well. And for that reason, I don't have this goal this summer of how many miles of pipe or how many miles of road we're going to improve. How many instances of very poor drainage are we going to address?
Yeah, Brett.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, again, I do appreciate this is sorely needed, what you guys are undertaking. And it's not an easy thing to resolve. And we went through the same challenges with the defensible space ordinance. And what came out of that, after much heated debate, I mean, like really heated, like you had to call the meeting off because people were so riled up. They ultimately went to a phased approach. Like, I don't think there is such a big issue here. I don't think we'll solve it all immediately. But some things are more an immediate need than others, like a good policy for people that are building new houses, to make sure that the new houses aren't damaging the road. To me, that would be first and foremost. And then secondly, how do we deal with the people who are already there that have met what may have been the code requirements at the time, but now have situations where their drainage is damaging the road. I tell you, if money wasn't an issue, I'd just say, Kurt, go do it. Rip out every culvert that's bad, put a new one in. Let's get this fixed because this is costing us money in the long run because of road damage, and it's costing satisfaction levels from both constituents and from visitors. But unfortunately, we don't have that kind of money. So we do gotta come up with something, and it's gotta be something where the, to me, the homeowners that have already built a home before the new policy comes out have some incentive to come into compliance. And if they choose not to, because there will be many that will, we have to have some teeth. Even though I don't like using them, I always like to, catch flies with honey. I don't like to use a fly swatter. But you gotta have teeth, because if you don't, for some people, they'll never respond.
Well, do we know, and I'm sure you do, like these 5 roads we keep redoing because the culverts are bad? I mean, can we start small and say we're gonna work with the homeowners? We can come up with the plan, we can get this set to where it's well defined to where you think it will solve the problems if everyone met this. And then start with a small group of roads, work with the homeowners and say, we want to fix your road and we want to fix it long-term, but y'all are gonna have to be involved. And the involvement for you comes in with your culverts. And if we had several we could point to and say, go drive that road. The homeowners got involved, we got it done, and it's lasting. I think you would get more buy-in.
Yes.
There's,
Well, we had started, moving forward with a plan, had the code enforcement officer on board, and the plan was, we even came up with a method to make notations of the area, take pictures, verify the address, and basically first build this list. And from the addresses, we get people's contact information, start off with a good approach here. You have an issue, this is what your driveway's doing, you see, in the hopes that it would spur action. But as we started getting into that process, that's when we kind of felt we needed a little better feeling about the not just the act of enforcement, but the ability to truly enforce when it would get to that point. And quite frankly, the last roads and infrastructure meeting that we met just recently, the one prior to that was August 5th. This process of trying to figure out a way to address these driveways that are impacting the roads should have been the number one topic. And not to, I appreciate anybody that's willing to spend time on a committee, but I think a little bit of time was perhaps lost for self-serving purposes. Okay, and I just really don't want to go down that road anymore. And I'm all for, it's always a challenge when you're mixing departments, but I know we can do it. Joel Legg is a great guy, and he works for Chief Holdridge, who's just been a blessing for the village. We need to have a good, consistent process, because that's one of the biggest failures in the past when they've tried to address this issue is the process has not been consistent. It has not been consistent. It wasn't consistently enforced, just as encroachment permits not being consistently enforced. There's great frustration still with some of the contractors that over years they would go in to bid a job and bid it do it the way it's supposed to be done, where it's going to last and it's not going to impact the road. Somebody come in and build it at a lower standard and it passes. Okay, so
but that kind of thing is under your control.
it is now,
Right.
Yeah.
So I think the bigger issue is because you can come in and you can say, sorry, you don't pass. But for the me's of the world, the people who own a property and don't understand any of this, it's a great learning thing to start seeing how it impacts it.
Sure.
It's getting that knowledge out there. So that people will step up and say, hey, I didn't know, but I'm happy to fix it. How? I don't know how. I don't know who a good contractor is. I don't know what kind of contractor I'm looking for. You know,
We
so,
need to just have that list of everybody who has a business license with Angel Fire or what field they're in. I think we should have that out for all the trades.
I agree.
That's not us recommending. We had this discussion last time. I gotta be real careful. I've got some great friends out there in the excavation business. Okay, people that I've worked with for many years. And I mean, I have to walk a fine line because anybody I would recommend, they say, well, you do it because he's your friend. So, well, a lot of them are. Ed Illuminative, the
Yeah.
first machine I ever got in was with them when I was 14 years old. Kyle Moore is a great friend of mine, Nate Kite, Cole Lindsay. So many of them, there's not many people in that business that I'm not friends with. But I don't want something like that to cause problems. But absolutely, I don't see any reason why we couldn't just have a list from those people that have a business license. Just saying, these are the people that have a business license.
We
This
have
is
that
what
list,
they
we
do.
could do that.
but, and the other thing I don't know, because I don't hear a lot of information from the village. I do see stuff on the different Angel Fire boards, but there's a lot of them. I do follow the chamber, I follow the village. I still don't feel like I see a lot of information about what's going on in town. So as a homeowner, I don't know how I would figure out that that information is available to me. How I would know the impact that culverts have on the road, how I would know any of that. So. And maybe my entire contribution to this place is being an ignorant homeowner who doesn't understand roads.
You're absolutely, yeah.
You know, so it's like step one is get me that information. So that I know what I'm looking at. I can go stand in my culvert and go, oh, look, it does need some work. And I have this nice list of contractors, I'll find somebody. You know, and
Sure.
maybe they'll fix my road and it will stay fixed this time, you know, type thing. Going back to the working a road at a time. If you can get all those homeowners, it gives you a more limited set of people to work with. You're not trying to do the whole village at one time.
Yeah.
You're working on this one road, maybe even one block of one road. And maybe ones that have a full-time homeowner on it, so that they can help rally up the rest of the people. I don't know, there just has to be a way to get the word out to the me's of the world.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. There are, I mean, and that may be an approach that we may take to try and segment the worst roads and try and focus on them, but it can't be just that. Because with, you know, depending upon which road you're talking about, we have 128 miles of road, including service roads, 106 miles of roads that are public roads. And we have a small crew. I mean, for us to go focus on a block, it would take us a decade or more to make it through everything. And the roads are getting eaten up, and the more those roads are getting eaten up, the more these crews aren't able to spend time on that, because they're having to go fix the roads. So doing that could be a good piece, we could focus on, and it'd be a helpful piece. But we need to figure out how to get the constituents to come in compliance en masse to have significant impact on the quality of the roads. And the funny thing is, the more they do help, the less time our staff would have to spend on maintenance, and the more time we could spend on these other things.
Yeah, and I'm just telling you that I've lived at my house 6 years. And never looked at my culvert until I started coming to these meetings. And I'm like, huh, I should go see what my culvert looks like maybe. Never gave it a thought.
Well, you
And
know,
now when I'm walking the dog, I look at everybody's culvert and I'm like, they don't have culverts. This guy's got his rocked off. Is that acceptable? I don't know.
no.
It sounds like it might be a good plan. I mean, I looked at that and thought I should do that to mine. But,
And that's part of it, I mean, right now. We don't have any teeth in ordinance to do anything. Except for new construction, where we have that approval process, but even then. We just did raise the rates on that, But even then,
I hope we will do.
the new rate's $3,000. I mean, if you have a full-size driveway, you're not gonna get a drop culvert in, or it's gonna be in the $3,000 range. So somebody would say, I'll just walk away from the deposit, it'd be cheaper and easier than fixing it. And you know what we can do about that? Keep their deposit, that's our only recourse.
Well, like APO can stop you from selling your house if you haven't closed your permit. Can you not do that?
We can't do that because it's not in
They can't
ordinance.
do that.
They say they can.
I'm on the architectural review board
Mhm.
and I do the inspections for the HOAs when those houses come up. And if there is something that's not in compliance, we can ask
Not the
them.
not in compliance, an open permit that never got closed. Okay, cause I'm being
Nope.
told, I had an open permit, cause I've been fighting with them over a fence, I did close it. Lost my deposit because it's a long story, but APO's not my friend. But I was told you won't be able to sell because of this open permit.
There'll be a mark on it. We've had people that have fenced off areas
Thank you very much.
on their property line, which was illegal, and put in an illegal fence and spent $40,000 doing. And all we could do is say, that's not in compliance. And so that black mark goes to the title company. And if the new owner wants to assume that liability, they have every right to do that, and it's still wrong.
Back to what you were saying about information from the time when I first started the job, January 5th, 2024, we had 13 straight days of snow. Okay, and even going in, when I first met with the mayor, now manager, I talked about the need for public education. And after 13 days straight of snow, and the calls that I got, not just from tourists, but from full-time residents. People need to be educated about what's happening up here. Quite frankly, I never realized how unprepared some people are to live in this environment. And, but that holds true with the summertime roads as well. And and Brett can verify this many times. I'd be to go up to the community center, fill it full of people, let them yell and scream at me. I'll try to educate people. Okay. But what I've learned since I started this job is that those things get bogged down, absolutely bogged down by self-serving logic and coffee shop talk, People talking that why don't you just do this? It would solve all the problems in a week. Okay. What people need to be educated on is one, there is the absolute desire to fix everything up here. They also need the understanding that some of the conditions we have, some of the things we have are not fixable. Something we have to contend with. Just as in the winter, I've had so much input on how the snow removal plan could be done better. And not one of them covers every scenario we have with snow. Okay. I agree with you. There is that need for education. I'm not an educator. I'm just an old ditch digger. Okay, I would love to be able to educate people in terms that they can understand. What happens in these meetings when somebody comes up and uses some terminology that sounds very complicated and very like this big source of knowledge that and they think this is this person knows everything they're talking about. We need to do exactly what he says. If you come from the other side where somebody has been dealing with such matters, it's common knowledge. The toughest thing is getting people to really grasp the scale of the challenge that we have. But as I've assured everybody from the get-go, I fully understand what the challenge is to get these roads up to where they need to be. I fully understand, we haven't even had any conversation about water. This is a Streets and Infrastructure Committee, okay? It's a huge undertaking. But you know, to sit back and say, well, all the roads are messed up, I'm not gonna do anything. Hey, this is an old water system, I'm not gonna do anything, we gotta start somewhere. But in every aspect of it, you know, and that, you have my assurance that that's what I'm gonna do. But I also want people to at least make the effort to understand that when I'm trying to convey the scope of the challenge that's in front of us, this isn't me making excuses. A lot of people don't accept reality very well. And you know, if I stay here for the next 10 years, I don't think it's possible for me to resolve every situation on these roads.
Probably not.
Even with, if I was still allowed to, as Brett would say, spend money like a drunken sailor.
So,
I'm sorry for babbling on a little bit. I want y'all to have confidence that we're trying our best, but it's a huge scope with limitations. And I gotta tell you, I've told people, you know, we don't have the staffing levels for that. They say, well, just go hire some more. You can probably appreciate how hard it is to find a good blade hand. They're, you know,
Yeah.
good truck driver. Good truck driver with a driver's license. But that's not to say we're not trying, you know, we're gonna, you know, try, but that's limitations, but I'm not gonna use that as an excuse to do nothing. Say, well, I don't have enough people to take care of all of it, so I'm gonna do nothing. I'm gonna take the crew that I've got and we're gonna go give it our all. That's what we're doing.
How many miles of undersized water lines do you have?
47.
And I'm sure that part of that, you've got some 2-inch lines as well, right? In that,
Yes.
what are you looking at as far as mileage on a 2-inch line?
The 2-inch isn't as much as the 3 and 4 are really similar. I want to say on the 2-inch, we were in the 4 to 5 mile range.
One possibility for you to consider, may be, cause I've heard scuttlebutt about, the village, instead of waiting for a outside contractor, however many years it takes to get them up here to put in the new infrastructure, your water lines and possible sewer lines. That, at the same time, then you look at, obviously, that would be an opportune time to look at this encroachment issue with these box culverts. And put that in so that once that infrastructure is in, you know that road is in decent compliance. You've got decent drainage on your bar ditches, and everything is working. And at that point in time, once you get to that point, then the village can look at maybe taking in and you doing maintenance on and accepting those particular encroachment culverts and stuff and working it that way to where you're doing it incrementally. And it's, you know, obviously it's going to take years, just like the defensible space, where you've got 10 or 15 years where you're working in compliance. Dark sky, I know they've talked about a 5-year plus type implementation. And I don't think anybody with any common sense understands that, you know, or expects that the village can turn this thing around in a short period of time. It's going to take a long time to do that.
It is. Well, and you brought up a point, you know, we're currently working on plan and design in the Monteverde Lake subdivision. It's a pretty small area. Plan and design and construction is estimated to be $9 million. Just for that area, so seeking grant money, I think we have a good opportunity. You know, and understanding, and I've had this discussion with the engineer, and I've known him for quite some time. He said, you know, there's more to this than just switching the water lines. Because when we get done with the water lines, we're not just gonna take the dirt, smooth it back up, and there you go. Involved in that is building that road to the village spec profile. Okay, and we haven't had a chance to talk about it more, but speaking with the engineer, he's like, well, when we're working on the road profile, are we gonna design in all the driveway culverts as well? I
You
personally feel that we should,
You better.
because if
So-
we don't do it, it's gonna undo everything. So at that point, it would be logical that to one, we either take over the maintenance or say, this is what you have to do, you have to maintain this or else.
Yeah,
The issue is like, I would love for us just to do it. I mean, I like to be in control of things, cause then I can make sure they get done right. But the cost of fixing all those culverts, even though that's a relatively flat area, just for this one, you have to keep in mind, we've already had to break this very relatively small project into two pieces, because at $9 million, we can't get funding and we don't have debt capacity to take a loan to do it. So we had to break it down into $4 million sections. Well, now if we're gonna put in drop culverts for all those driveways or whatever is required to do, I don't know what that cost is gonna be. But it's gonna, in that $4 million section that they're saying we can get funding for, it's gonna push that piece down. And now instead of two pieces that are gonna take us, 6 years to finish, it's gonna be maybe 4 pieces. It's gonna take us 12 years to finish.
Is there a plan to address the sewer in that area too? I had heard somewhere along the way that we want to extend the city sewer.
Well, there was talk of, obviously the best place to start expanding the sewer is where there's something to tie into.
Mm.
So in Monte Verde 1 and 2, which is just south of the country club, that was an option that was discussed as very good, because there's two tie-in points, one from the pit and one from the recent project at the country club. Unfortunately, everybody's making that determination by looking at a piece of paper on the flat. And they don't realize that whole subdivision breaks off in 4 directions. And one point is at a high spot and the other one is down in a dip that will only accommodate a small area. So there's more to it than just, okay, we're going from here to there. Granted, you can pump sewage, this, that, and the other. But the one thing that is driving the Monte Verde Lake subdivision being close is there is a lack of, and in some cases, complete absence of fire hydrants. One of the big components of these undersized lines is they won't accommodate fire hydrants. Village standard right now is a fire hydrant every 400 feet. That's why in the pit areas, Valley of the Utes, everywhere, they're all within sight of each other. But they have pipe sized to accommodate them. Most of these places that don't have fire hydrants don't have the size pipe. We could stick a fire hydrant there, but it's fed by a 2-inch line. Won't do it. So with knowing that ISO rating is very important, fire protection is very important, and zeroing in on that area, we realized that Aspen subdivision and the pit, Brazos in that area is construction that was done under the current village standards, so there's frequent fire hydrants. You have the Valley of the Utes and you have the upper portion of the pit, so forth and so on, but we saw that as an opportunity to get one more of our boundaries that has fire hydrants and then work our way in. But to do sewer and water there and put the sewer in now, just so it's there whenever 10 years down the line, it might reach there. There's definite logic to that. Hey, we're tearing up the road once. Absolute definite logic. That's assuming that the design from where the sewer ends to there remains the same. The last thing you would want to happen is install this sewer infrastructure that can't be supported by what's done in between. Obviously what you would have done in between, you would make sure it accommodates it. The biggest challenge of upsizing the water lines and putting the sewer in, from a, I guess you would say the construction standpoint is if it's gonna fit. And Monte Verde 1 and 2, there's a big question about that. Where's it gonna fit?
But if it doesn't fit today, it won't fit in 10 years,
Yeah,
so.
Yeah,
It
you
can
know,
be
but
resolved
technology will
whenever.
come up, but the issue is, and again, back to finance, is Monteverde Lake 1 and 2, we're just doing water lines only because there's not a connection point easily obtainable for sewer. And everybody says, oh, you wanna dig the road up once, and you're right, if we had access to sewer, we would only wanna dig the road up once, but waiting, if we're gonna wait on sewer for that, none of us will be here when it gets done. Because of the fire protection requirements, that we have now and the ISO ratings, it's already getting challenging with, to get insurance on your homes here. A decision was made, we've gotta do the water lines, we can't wait on sewer.
one of
And-
the, going to education, one of the worst assumption is that you dig it once, dig a big ditch and just throw them both in there.
No, you can't do that.
Sewer has to be.
And again, putting sewer lines in, even if we don't connect them, so we thought about, well, we'll just put sewer lines in and someday they'll get there, right? Just like we did back here in Liberty Square, those sewer lines were put in 20 years ago. But if, the thing is, it doubles the cost, so we're back to this, we've had to break this piece, that's a small piece really. A $9 million project for just water lines into two pieces to get funding for it. Well, you double that cost if you want to do sewer, so now you're gonna have to break it down into even smaller pieces to get that $4 million to $5 million funding gap.
One of the biggest challenges and the reasons to, another reason to break it into smaller components is when you get funding, the project has to be complete within 24 months. Complete, done, signed off. Okay, with the funding sources, you're usually, all of them pretty much, you find out if you got the funding or not the 1st of August, early August. Okay, so you're essentially 2 months away from when winter can potentially start. Very few companies would mobilize in to start right away. Then you lose construction time through the winter. So in that 24-month cycle, if you're lucky, you have 13 months of work time. So the scale of the project has to be set to where it can be done within that time period. There's a few companies in New Mexico that could handle everything where you wouldn't have to phase it out and get it done within 2 years. But they're not even gonna bid on a project this small, because, well, one, for instance, is $500 million backlogged work that they already have. So it has underestimated the challenge of getting people to do the work. You gotta find people that have the bonding capabilities. And these projects are in the mid-range. They're in those companies that are in between small and big that are affected by bonding capabilities. And we hear time and time again of communities that have been awarded these grants. They go out to RFP, don't get a single bidder. You know, but we've got to try, but our hopes are that we break it into a manageable size that can be done within the building time. And, you know, to accommodate the seasonal work up here. And hopefully get it in that range where we'll have more people that have that level of bonding capability. You know, because there's a huge difference in the number of contractors out there that have the bonding capability of $5-6 million to the ones that have 10, 15, 20, 500 million, whatever.
And I wanna say, it sounds like we're coming up with a bunch of excuses. I'm actually starting to get uncomfortable with all of our excuses. But I don't look at it, the reason we're having this conversation with you is because we need something out of you. We need guidance on how to make Title VII work for this village. But for you to come up with that guidance and for it to be appropriate, you have to have this understanding and knowledge of reality, so. Even though it sounds like we're talking about excuses why we don't do things, it is something we had to consider in our process, and since you're working with us to develop this, we do need you to know and understand the conditions we're working under.
So since we've had two conversations now, I think we may be at the point where we can draft something based on those and bring them back to you. And we can start getting into a hard copy to use as a basis to move forward.
Yeah, and my suggestion would be that wherever you have these areas that we've kind of highlighted, when there's some ambiguity as to responsibilities and stuff, try to be as clear as possible and outline, just like this licensing, the surety bond type thing. So that there is no question if an individual wants to do it themselves, and like I said, that kind of 100, permits that you would give out for encroachment permits and stuff, you might get one. But still, you still have to have, it's easier to have the clear language to begin with than it is to try and clear up the bad talk that goes on about how the village screwed up and did this and they didn't do that and didn't make any sense, and
Sure.
they're screwing me because of this or that. So that's why I suggested, some type of language in there.
And I also agree with you that if this is not well written, it's hard to enforce.
Yes.
And enforcement has to be part of it. Education and all that has to happen, but we have to have, like you said, the teeth to come back behind it and say, we explained it all to you. We told you why yours isn't working. You're not doing anything about it, so there's consequences. And yeah, unless this is well written, detailed, you can't do that, so.
So this is gonna take some time. I think, to be fair to Kurt, we need 5 or 6 weeks for you to get through end of year and to be able to sit down and think about this.
Yeah, but I would like to get y'all's email addresses, so if I do, I don't wanna wait till the next time we get together if I have something that I want to share with you. Okay, and of course, my number's posted on the website. My cell phone number is always the best one to reach me on. I love for people to call me. As you've heard me say before, I do not respond, plan, or do anything based on Facebook. I don't respond to that at all. I have had great successes of when people did finally come in and sit down and visit with me. I've had great conversations, and I would prefer to do that. But yeah, but if we're gonna go 5 weeks out, if I have anything worthy of communicating to y'all, I'd like to be able to get it to you. Okay.
Well, I'm gonna suggest August 7th. Are both of you,
What size water lines are you guys planning on putting in? 7,
6 and 8.
6 is even kind of small for fire protection.
It's
The minimum.
It's the minimum.
Yeah, they just don't want to hook on and suck.
We actually, there are some hydrants on 4-inch lines that pass flow and pressure. Very few. I can name them for you. I got the list on laptop.
I don't know if I'll be in town on August 7th, but I will be accessible by Zoom.
okay? Okay, I guess sooner then would be better for you, or,
Not necessarily.
okay,
I'm hoping to go to my sister's at the end of July, but I don't know how fast I would be back. So that last week of July, for sure, I would like to go. I
right,
would like to be gone. Well, take that back. I have a doctor's appointment. You do not postpone doctor appointments out here.
If you can get them taken.
But still, it's on the 31st, so I wouldn't be able to do it then anyway.
So then maybe
Go back to the 7th. I think
August.
I'll
Good to
commit
see
to
you.
the 7th.
How about you? Okay,
So far, it's fine.
all right.
For what it's worth, if you get bored with it on your spare time, pipe sizing, information is in Title IX. As far as minimums.
All right. So we'll bring you something to look at.
I have a little better insight because I used to work doing this kind of stuff. Plus, my son is a registered professional engineer, civil engineer, so
So we're the guys that drew in all the roads in this community.
I have insight. Well, his insight is that he's actually has some actual experience and he doesn't just look at a piece of paper.
I bet he knew how to pick up a shovel when he went to engineering school.
Before he went to engineering school.
Yeah, I can tell the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much. We're gonna try to get there.
So I do want to ask, in your mind, Brett, what is the best way to communicate with the property owners?
With property owners.
What's your best solution so far?
So
Like best option, best opportunity, or?
What gets the best
what
response?
method
What
is
gets
best?
the best,
social media.
really? The 2 times a year property owners are watching social media?
Well, they're not watching, I mean, not all of them. The problem is that there's no answer for all of them. Like, we even have, everybody has an account here, right? We don't require an email address, so a third of our people, we don't have their email. That are property owners and, you know, so it really, it's probably gonna be a combination of things, but we send things out, of course, we're doing our last water bills. Mailed water bills, this week. But we send stuff out on water bills, people don't read their water bill. They found they just don't read it. So it's a multifaceted, but if you're looking at which one we get the most feedback from, it's it's a social media post to our website that then we go and repost in like a dozen different groups. Because everybody belongs to different
Travis,
groups.
It's
not a easy answer, to be honest.
Okay. No, that's what I expected though, because that's where I get most of mine. I stumbled across it on one of the village groups.
And we have people, we try to get people to sign up because we have notifications that go out. We have a great system of notifications that go out, both either text or email. And you can choose which way you want to get it. And the topics, we probably have 15 different topics that you can choose. Yeah, I want notifications about this. But, you know, even then, we probably have 50% of the property owners that signed up for one of those 15 options. And sometimes it's just Parks and Rec, you know, so you don't want to send an email to all the Parks and Rec people about roads.
But maybe you do if you need to get to
You
everybody.
gotta kind of balance out, because if you just send everything to everybody and then the
And I'm not
segmentation.
saying every time, but maybe an initial hits every
Do
group,
that.
you know, that just says, hey, we just want you to know what's going on with that.
Yeah, we did the newsletter in with the water bills and stuff.
Yeah, I am as bad as anyone at not looking. I'm like, I don't even want you by mail.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you. We'll adjourn.
No, back in April, we met and Santos came. We didn't meet, we didn't have a forum, but 2 of us were here. And Santos came and he had cool software